time. After this amazing panel discussion on right to repair, you're going to join us right outside this door in the atrium for the happy hour, the happiest hour of our day, the last event. It's so happy we made it an hour and a half. So come, grab you a drink, whether it's an adult or not. We will all toast to a really great time, more education that we have, and all of these amazing contacts that we've made. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris and Al. We are going to talk about the right to repair town hall presentation. Does that mean they need to be engaged and ask questions?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Chris, Al, over to y'all.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Well, hey, how about a round of applause for the MD Publishing? MD Publishing. Woo-hoo! I mean, the amount of investment they make into our community is fantastic. They really are second to none when it comes in to investing in the healthcare technology management community. So I just treasure what they do for us by getting us together in meetings like this. This is fantastic. The ability to listen to what other folks are doing in the community and taking best practices, thinking you might be doing it the best when, hey, Al over here is doing it. Man, that sounds great. I got to try that out. So it's a great opportunity to get together and talk about things. And Al and I are here this afternoon to talk about right to repair. I'm sure everybody know what right to repair is. Okay. Okay. I get a lot of shaking heads. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What did I do? Oh.
You may have to stand behind.
Oh. There it is. All right. So there's some pictures of Al and I. Oh my goodness gracious. So Al and I have been around for quite some time, decades in the industry. You know, the right to repair, there's a lot of pressures on all sides of us today. You know, we are pressed to deliver value for our employer, whether you're an in-house clinical engineering person or you're a third party or you work for a manufacturer or a third party repair organization. Lots of pressures. We all are trying to save money or make money for our employer. And even if you're a not-for-profit, right, you got to make a profit, right? That's how they give us raises. That's how they buy more capital. So the not-for-profit, you got to make a profit. And how do we get at that? I always, you know, I'll do a pro forma and I'll show my C-suite, whether it's the CFO or the CEO, and I'll show them some bottom line savings that we've delivered. And I said, how many surgeries would we need to do to drop a number like that to the bottom line at our margin rate, right? So now I work for one of the for-profits. So I work for Community Health Systems. We're one of the for-profits like UHS or HCA, Tenant, a couple more in there, Prime Healthcare. Al, why don't you?
That I often talk about is if your organization is at a 2% operating margin, which in today's numbers is actually quite good. Operating margins in healthcare organizations are razor thin. But let's say your organization is at a 2% operating margin and you can do something that can save your organization $1 million off the bottom line. They would have to generate $50 million in new revenue to have that same impact. So things like this, you know, being able to take on service that maybe is typically outsourced and being able to do that effectively and efficiently is key to impacting the bottom line. So it's critical, as Chris says, to the viability of our industry.
I was 2 Fridays ago, I was at our corporate office in Franklin, Tennessee, and I was meeting with the CFO, who actually just became our CEO and president because our CEO was retiring. And he's in the room, and our chief digital officer's in the room, and a few others. But I looked at Kevin and, you know, some of the numbers that I had put together and showing him what those meant to us. I said, Kevin, I use that statement, how many more surgeries would you need to do? He said, I couldn't do it, Chris. I couldn't do it. We could not increase that amount of revenue to hit that number, drop that number to the bottom line. So that was pretty cool. And we need to be thinking like that, right? Whether you're a third party or an in-house, or you got to be thinking, what's our value proposition to our employer? From the third party perspective, you want to make sure your company or the hospital that you're doing the service for is winning, and you can certainly impact that. So, talk a little bit about what is the right to repair. So there's a lot of pressures on us. Manufacturers certainly want to drive more margin. They have more pressures to lower the cost on the capital. Where are they going to make it up at? In service. And if you're not paying attention, they will make it up in service very well. A lot of software maintenance agreements, SMAs, you see that a lot now. So there's a lot of margin associated with those types of agreements that we're seeing come into our environment. Having to rely on the manufacturer for all of our service is not only expensive, but it creates lengthy delays. I'm sure we're all pressed for FTE count and trying to hire people on board. Folks are moving around, not so much as when COVID first started, but now we still have folks that move around, and the manufacturers have the same problem, right? They're struggling with hiring people just like we are. I try to partner up with some colleges and facilities that are driving, like Seabed out of San Antonio. Some of my local community colleges or four-year universities have some biomedical programs, and even some of the technical. I've had very good success getting folks from some of the technical schools that are still around, and the transition has been very simple for them. So that's pretty good.
So I'm just curious, who in the room has had challenges that you can cite getting parts or getting access to service keys that have inhibited your ability to service equipment? Wow, a lot of hands.
Yep. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
So we talk about right to repair. If we're hanging our hat on the federal government to save us, that ain't going to happen. There's an awful lot of money in lobby organizations in Washington, D.C. that are making sure that the right to repair getting down to the in-house or the third-party biomed is very challenging for them. So there's some big manufacturers you can read about. I would encourage you to go on the website. AdvaMed website is one of the big organizations in the industry where a lot of those manufacturers partnered up with. So that AdvaMed is their voice to government, and you'll see who's in there with that. But if we're relying on some federal law to come along and save us, it's probably not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Well, and even if it does happen, I can't think of a single piece of legislation that didn't have unintended consequences associated with it. So while that may be one part of the solution, I don't believe that it's the ultimate solution.
Yeah, and there's states, right? You hear a lot of folks, and I always, when I do a right to repair, please put your finger on the pulse of what your state is doing. What's the state of Wisconsin doing on right to repair? There is only, and there are states that are passing right to repair laws. Guess what? It has nothing to do with medical devices. Nothing. Most of them are for farmers. Farmers, what's that? Yeah, John Deere. Here, yeah. Yeah, so John Deere, I have breakfast, I live in a farming community. I have breakfast, and they're mostly all farmers, cattle farmers in my neck of the woods. And, John Deere, they have, the Kubota guys, of course, make fun of the John Deere guys, but yes, John Deere. So these right to repair laws are targeted at that, or consumer electronics, telephones, things like that. There is only one state, though, however, that has put forward a bill. Vermont has House Bill 160, and you can look that up when you go home tonight or over the weekend. That is specifically for medical devices. They're driving it, and they have House Bill 161 for everything else. Those two bills were introduced in February of this year, and they were killed in committee. However, they were referred to a Commerce committee. So it's not dead. It was dead in that committee to move forward to on the legislative side, but it was referred to another Commerce committee, an Economic Development Committee. So those folks got it in their hands now. But that really is the only bill that has anything to do with medical devices. So, I encourage you, like I said, states are really getting involved. There's a lot of states. I don't know if I put how many states are involved, but there are at least 15, 20 states that have something going through. Again, mostly consumer electronics or farm equipment, things like that. If you think our military is immune to this, you're sadly mistaken. The latest thing that just happened this July 21st, just what's that, a week ago or so, the Gordon Gay, or Gay Gordon Byrne, who is a repair.org, Repair Association, submitted a letter to the Senate on behalf of the armed forces for right to repair on medical devices. So those folks in the military are struggling with some of the same things that we do in the private sector. So that was the latest little bit of shot in the arm to right to repair. But again, it's stuck in the Senate, and so far, as I followed it, it's gone nowhere. So over 40 states, I knew I had that in there, over 40 states have introduced some type of legislation, Vermont being the only one for medical devices. Now, New York had one for wheelchairs. There was, and I believe that passed through the New York legislature. So, if you want to call that a little camel's nose under the tent for medical devices, you could do that. So the debate centers around balancing consumer rights and patient safety, and that's where you'll hear AdvaMed a lot. Peter Weems is one of their big loudmouths, if you will. Always posting on LinkedIn. If you see Peter Weems' name, you want to read that, because he's always talking about patient safety. But we were down in Washington, D.C. Well, it was Gaithersburg, Maryland, at a FDA meeting. And gosh, there were, I want to say, 400 manufacturers in the room. There were hospitals in the room, third parties in the room. And, the right to repair was hot and heavy during that. What came out of that was Amy was hosting or driving, facilitating a meeting on a monthly basis. I was part of the steering committee and was on that committee for, 7 years or so. And they were facilitating that so that we all could work together to develop what the FDA calls a collaborative community. And that committee's still around. I don't see them meeting as frequently, but we're still driving toward a collaborative community recognition by the FDA. The problem was, about 2 or 3 years into it, the manufacturers pulled out. So we had all kinds of stakeholders involved in that meeting, and then all of a sudden, AdvaMed pulled out, as well as a bunch of the manufacturers. So, we're not really collaborative. We're trying to get into the collaborative community. There's a couple of, I think Steris is still engaged. There's a couple of manufacturers still engaged in that process, but it's very limited. So.
Yeah, one thing I want to add too is did a session start out the day today on leveraging data to improve financial and your finances and operations, and we focused a lot on data integrity. And if we were as diligent as we ought to be about our documentation, I think this battle would be a lot easier for us to fight. So that's just one more reason to make sure that we're doing a good job of documenting everything that we do.
Man, I think that's a great point because Bin Wang was very instrumental for those that know Bin, and he was really had some great data analytics associated. You know, I was part of a group that was feeding information to Bin. Bin was part of Sodexo. I was part of UHS at the time. We had 132,000 devices in our inventory. Mike Bustiger from Intermountain up in Utah was feeding data. We had over 1 million devices of data. And, you know, during that meeting, it showed there was no, that doing third-party repair or in-house repair was not contributing to any kind of harm to patients or increasing likelihood of equipment failure. It was very, very good data. So I mentioned AdvaMed, that's how it's spelled. So when you look it up, take a peek at that. They are all over the world because a few years ago, I gave a presentation in Italy to the clinical engineering, Italian Clinical Engineering Association out in Italy. And one of the things that they were hot to trot for was to listen to how we could repair stuff. A lot of their parts have to come from the manufacturer. They are very frustrated trying to get at what we have. Some of the, I don't know if there's any third-party organizations, parts suppliers in the room. No, there's one in the back. You know, they were clamoring for the opportunity to buy parts from third parties. And following me in that presentation was the guy from the European Union, the regulatory guy from the European Union. So he came to me afterwards and wanted to understand a little bit more about the FDA and how we're getting parts. So you think we have it bad? They have it a little bit worse over in the EU in trying to fix equipment in a timely. Their problem is timely opportunity to get parts and things like that. That's their biggest challenge. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Today's been a bit of a family reunion with all of my old Aurora employees that I run into. But one of them, Brian Merschberger, was my parts procurement specialist and excelled at what he did. And we collected a lot of data from all of our sources, our parts sources on things like wrong part delivery, DOAs, late part deliveries, all those kinds of things. And the one company that always floated to the top of that list was GE. So you know, and we had a strategic alliance agreement with GE, so we did a lot of work to remedy that. But to assume that you know, if you go to the OEM, you're going to get the best part always is, in our experience, not always the case.
So where do we go? So how can we be more effective in getting what we need to do for our jobs? Like I said, federal legislation is going to be long and slow. State legislation is proving to be similar, although moving a little bit more quickly. There was a TechNation article a little bit ago, and again, Gay had this statement in that article. Hospital leadership plays a pivotal role in influencing OEM behavior. If hospital admins want right to repair, it's far more likely to happen, said Gay. Large hospital systems have the leverage of the purchase order. And that is critical. That is critical. Better words could have been spoken with regard to this problem that we have. We have to have a seat at the table in your local organizations. Again, whether you're third party or in-house, if you're third party, you should have that seat at the table and influence your customer. You're there to help your customer. They're paying you to be their medical device experts. So have that seat at the table. If you're in-house, similarly, get with your administrator, educate them on the challenges of right to repair, timely repair of the devices. If you have to cancel or delay cases because you have to wait 24 or 48 hours for an OEM to show up, That's money. That's real dollars versus being able to troubleshoot it and have something, a part sent in overnight. Were you going to say something else?
Well, you mentioned Ben Singh earlier, and his big thing over the last couple of years has been fake news, right? And that's what they're using to paint this picture of anybody other than the OEM creating a patient safety issue and potential. And I'm just curious, has anyone in this room experienced a patient event based on bad service? I mean, I've been doing this for coming up on 50 years, and I've never had an issue of an adverse event for a patient based on bad service ever.
Yeah, the only thing I could equate to is when I had an MR down for a week. You know, that now, did we have a patient adverse event? Probably not, but did we delay, a diagnosis or a treatment? I'm sure we have, you know.
Just to add, that's the part that's really hard to quantify, that I think the manufacturers are really hiding from. And if somebody has tried to quantify it, you brought up earlier that there's a business cost to delay enough time, but there is a patient cost. If you look at this on the aggregate, and you need equipment for diagnostics or therapeutics, so more specifically, they're tucked in. This aggregate data has to be, or I shouldn't say has to be, but it's likely that there is patient harm from delayed diagnostics and treatments that are really difficult to quantify. And I think probably anybody in here has experience, especially now with a lot of FTE shortages in the, I work more in the imaging space, but segments of US GE is having a really everybody's having a hard time keeping staff.
But what's the strategy, Ryan? The strategy, when you have an OEM contract, the strategy is, hey, we got this guy, a gal, all trained up. We send them in there, they pull error codes, and then they're getting on the phone with a subject matter expert.
But if it's 3 days before they can arrive, that's 3 days lost.
And that MRI device that I spoke about that was down for a week, that was under a full service agreement with the manufacturer. And they just kept on throwing, they probably threw $500,000 of parts at the machine trying to fix it.
And it's not to say that an in-house person might have gotten that fixed faster. I think if you give everything the benefit of the doubt, the real delta is the arrival to fix.
Correct.
Yeah.
I 1,000%. The arrival to fix, we're in house, and I keep on saying that. We're 5 minutes away, and even if I do sign a contract with the manufacturer, I tell them, look, man, my folks are going to touch the machine. If there's a problem, and it's something stupid that we can go in there and fix, we're going to fix it. I don't care if we have a full service contract. I'd like you to respond more quickly, but my aim is the patient. And we tell them when we negotiate with them for the master service agreement.
And if somebody is thinking that, just for whatever, if somebody's thinking that, you must not have very good contract terms if it's taking 2 or 3 days for a call member to respond. It doesn't matter that there's a 4-hour response time in that master service contract, because again, in the aggregate, they'll need that. Or if they don't in that instance, they'll take their haircut if that's built in there. That doesn't change the dynamic that their skilled employee that needs to fix this device can't get there for 3 days. It doesn't matter what the contract is. And for myself personally, we have a super strong in-house program. We don't run into, where we run into this more often than anything is during warranty. Yeah. And you can go to a point, but right, it's really sad that the service dynamic under warranty can be poorer than the service dynamic of a 12-year-old MRI.
Brian, you just struck a nerve with me. I had I'm going to talk about, I had a Siemens Artist Z, I think it was, brand new. This interventional neuro guy had to have it, had to have the Siemens. So we went and bought the Siemens for him. And Dr. Vivid Tank, remember him very well. And man, we just had nothing but issues from the day it was installed. And they would come in, get it up and running, but it would not be very reliable. And it was getting toward the end of the year, and Siemens is telling my director at the local facility, oh, here's the service contract. You don't have to worry about it. Just sign the service contract. And Brian calls me up and he says, dude, they're pushing a service contract down my throat. And I called everybody. I called Siemens. I got my senior leadership at the hospital, my C-suite, engaged, and of course the department where the device was installed. And we all met, and Siemens comes in loaded. They have their paperwork, and they said, hey, we've had 7 service calls on this instrument. And we said, hey, wait a minute. Here's 37 service calls that we have documented. Because the difference was, and this is, when they need service, they don't call the OEM directly. They, during the warranty period, they still don't call the OEM. We don't allow them to call the OEMs directly if it's under a service contract. In this case, it was under warranty. We still don't let them call the OEM directly for service. They must go through clinical engineering because we immediately open a work order. We document it. We call on their behalf, and we schedule the service. We were documenting everything, whether it was a hard down or a soft reboot, or if it was maybe a user error or something with the software that, typically a lot of my peers, you don't get those phone calls, right? They go by it, they maybe call applications, and the applications, we were getting all those calls. So we argued, we said, don't have a leg to stand on. But Chris, just sign the contract, then you don't have to worry about anything. I said, no, that's not the solution. The solution is make it work reliably and not cancel, not delay cases, because that's what we were doing. And they sent a guy in from Germany. They sent us, guess what? That guy from Germany fixed it. I didn't sign the service agreement. But I think the point that Ryan is making, and the little story that I just told, we have to stay on top of these manufacturers, whether you're buying a full service contract, partial, parts only contract. You got to stay engaged. You got to document everything. I think Al, he's our software guy. Talk about documentation.
Yeah, and I think that is the key. How many people work in organizations where the clinical department still calls the OEM directly for items that are under contract or warranty? Okay, so some. And like you did, Chris, that was a rule that we put in place when we signed the agreement with the vendor. Is we put in a workflow process that included when the department calls us, okay, and we can timestamp that call, because in any contract there are committed SLAs. Well, who's tracking that? Nobody, right? But if they call us and we call the vendor, now we have a timestamp when that call went in. We had, as part of the process, they were required to contact us when they were on site, and to contact us again along with the service report when the work was completed. Okay. Now we could track all those response times and turnaround times. And I'll go through a sample contract, that master agreement that we put together. But you made mention of the vendor's ability to maintain their uptime warranty, 98% uptime. If you actually did the calculation on that, you could literally be down a month on a system, which would kill you financially and from a patient workflow perspective, and they would still meet their uptime commitment. And so we changed how we measured that in the contracts to where it wasn't a percentage, it was hours per month. And if you exceeded that number of hours of downtime per month, we got a credit on our contract payment for the following month. So it was something that we really held their feet to the fire. And if you don't have your workflow set up that way, I suggest you start doing that.
Yep. So you hear us talking about, and I appreciate the audience participation. Feel free to jump in. But Mike Bustiger, I mentioned him earlier. Every organization has a legal counsel or government relations team. They need to understand what's at stake. So it's up to us to educate our leadership that what's going on with right to repair, why costs continue to escalate. They can help you. When I'm in a capital purchase situation and I have the clinical folks sitting next to me, I make sure that we're all on the same team. I had a microbiology physician that wanted a new analyzer, and the manufacturer was sitting on the other side of the table. And he said to them, hey, if you don't give them, meaning pointing at me, if you don't give them what they need, I can't give you what you need, which is the purchase order. And they caved and gave us what we need. Busticker said state associations must build local political relationships and unify HTM professionals. HTM leaders must understand how this impacts patient care, safety, and costs. Education is the first steps. Give biomeds the tools they need to take action.
So I reported up through supply chain. So that was a distinct advantage. It was a great reporting relationship. A lot of people now report to up through IT. Brian, I just heard a rumor that the relationship is now going to go back to supply chain. Okay. So I mean that's a great relationship, but to have, because now you're on the same team, right? But I also know of a lot of supply chain purchasing departments that are a little more than PO processors, and so this is where it's important to have a discussion with your CFO and let them know the impact that we can have if we have supply chain support. Like Chris said, the power of the PO is tremendous. And so we have to first develop strong relationships with those people in finance, supply chain, physician leaders. So when I left Aurora, I went to Alexian Brothers Health System to run their capital supply chain. And we had in the budget a single cath lab, and it was they wanted to standardize on Siemens. So I met with Noel Araneta, who is the director of cardiology services, and I said, Noel, my guess is that over the course of the next 5 or 7 years, you're going to want to standardize on all in the same lab, right? Because we had 12 labs across the system. And Lonnie, you talked about this a little bit in your session, the power of standardization. And I said to Noel, I said, I know you're gonna want to standardize, right? He says, absolutely. I float staff from hospital to hospital. To me, it's important that we have the same device everywhere. So there's a high level of competency. I said, great. And I'm not negotiating for one lab, I'm negotiating for 12 labs, okay? And that gave me a ton of power, but that by itself wasn't enough, because the cardiologists made it clear that they wanted Siemens. Okay, that's great, but as you all know, what often happens is they will go to the vendor and say, we're buying yours. Well, what incentive do they have then to negotiate on anything? None, right? So I went to their section group meeting and talked to the cardiologists, and I said, listen, I want what you want, okay? But I also want what you want in a way that's affordable for the organization, okay? And the more money we save on capital, the more I can fund additional devices for you all. So that's a distinct benefit. And I'm not asking you to do anything other than when they talk to you, when that vendor talks to you, say, you know what? Toshiba or Philips, they got a pretty good machine. We're actually open to looking at other options. That's all. That's all I'm asking you to do. Okay. At the end of the day, I'm going to work my tail off to get you what you want, but I want you to work with me. Okay. And help me do that at a price point that benefits all of us. And they did that. They did that. When all was said and done, I ended up, that first lab was free, and I ended up getting just phenomenal pricing on the other 11 that we locked in the pricing on. So, I mean, it's important to develop those kinds of relationships, and it's not just with the physician leaders, but the clinical leaders too. And again, let them know what benefit they will get from us being able to do the service. You know, you talked about delays, Chris. That's unacceptable to me. And there's this perception that the OEM service is the best service and the most competent service. Well, I had a mantra that, you know, we insourced a lot of our, in fact, all of our high-end service, other than 3 modalities. We didn't do the Gamma knife or the Cyber knife because they were very specialized, one-of-a-kind devices. I just didn't feel we'd be able to maintain a high level of competency on. And we didn't do the surgical robots because we all know how accommodating Intuitive is on that front. But everything else we did it in-house. And my commitment was, I'm not going to do anything that we can't do as good or better than the OEM. Okay. And fortunately for us, they didn't set the bar very high. So we absolutely could do that. But we used our contracting to make sure that we got access to the same training that their engineers got. We got access to the same diagnostic software that their engineers got access to. In the course of doing this, and this goes back to my Aurora days, we had one vendor push back, one, Philips Medical. And we outlined, this is how we do business at Aurora Healthcare. We do all our service in-house, and we partner with those organizations that support our model. And they're like, yeah, we don't do that. We're not gonna do that. And after a little discussion, it was, thanks for coming in. It's been nice doing business with you. And for 3 years, we didn't buy one frickin' thing from Philips. And at the end of that term, they came back and said, what's it gonna take for us to start doing business again? Well, we outlined that pretty clearly previously. This is how we work. This is how we do business. You support that model, we're happy to do business with you. And
I think you're bringing up a great point. The relationships matter.
Yeah.
And not that the salesperson from the OEM is a bad person, right? They have a job to do. They want to put food on their table for their family as well. But the relationship building with that person is important. And, you know, the relationship with a physician is also, because the salesperson is viewing that physician as the economic buyer.
Mhm.
So, you know, in the sales process, we have all these folks who are some sort of play some sort of role with the buying process. You have coaches, which a lot of us are. You have the economic buyer, which is the person that actually writes the purchase order. You have technical experts in the process, and they all participate in that buying process. You have to know where you fit in that process. But the salesperson is trying to determine who that economic buyer is, because that's who they need to influence. They need to influence that person to write their PO so they get the sale. But relationships matter.
yeah, they do. And so, as Chris said, get involved in the contracting process. And I always recommend that you do that on the front end while you still have those capital dollars in hand. That's why those master purchase and service agreements are so critically important, because you're still holding the dollars and you have all of that leverage. Like you said, Chris, the power of the PO. You can engage your GPO. I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are members of a GPO. Now, I would be careful with this one because there's only so much they're going to do. Those folks do not want to risk losing their admin
Right.
fees.
Their self-interest is their 3% admin fee.
Yeah.
So while they were supposed to work on your behalf.
However, I did have discussions with folks like Joe Disco, if any of you know him. He now works for Vizient, and some people that I know with Premier at the VP level on this topic. And they said that they won't go so far as to negotiate these things for you, but they will advise you on how to get the things that you need from a contracting perspective. So likely a worthwhile discussion to have. So I plugged into this a sample master equipment purchase agreement, and I'm not going to go through the entire thing. But this particular page I wanted to include because I want you to read that recitals part. This is to improve and ensure patient care and respond to market demands requiring the efficient delivery of healthcare. We are in the process of standardizing its technology and technology acquisition processes used by us and our affiliates to facilitate our efforts to standardize the technology used by our organization and its affiliates. We're entering into a strategic technology alliances with a select group of technology vendors. So that statement alone says, if you want to play, this is what it's going to take. Pursuant to these alliances, our organization and its affiliates will have the right to acquire products and services according to pre-established processes, prices, and terms. Okay, that lays it out pretty clearly that we're the ones in charge, not them. Okay, we're the ones with the money to spend. You're the ones that want to sell us something, but if you want to complete that sale, then here are the rules of engagement. So go next one, Chris.
Yep.
So here are the components of the purchasing section of the agreement. And it's like any contract, you have definitions. And this is important to have because I've often stated that if there's any dispute between your organization and an OEM or a vendor, you go back to the paper, right? And so that's why it's so important to have things clearly defined.
Oh no, they're going to give me a free TEE probe. Where's it? I don't see that. It doesn't say that in the purchasing order.
Yeah. There's a section on procurement of products and services, and it lists out their available products, but it also states future products. And the reason that this is important is that if you transition from your available products today to future products, we expect that we're going to get the same level of discounting that we have with the available product. Okay, same thing with enhancements. If there's enhancements to that available product, that we're going to get that at the discount that we've negotiated across the board. And then it outlines the entire procurement process and defines that. Then it goes into pricing, how things are invoiced. And this is important too. We required that they provide a savings report for all of the capital that we had acquired over the course of the contract, because we want to make sure that we're getting what we agreed to. And then payment terms, and we typically we're at net 60, and I know that our supply chain folks were pushing toward net 90 days, which they kind of struggle with. But and then most favored clause, and so if you can get this, it's a good thing to have, because other than the government, we got the best pricing that was available. And if you have that language written into the contract, it ensures that you're going to get most favored pricing. And the last thing under pricing is payment does not imply acceptance. So when you complete that final payment, it doesn't mean that you've accepted that product. I know that I think Lonnie, you said in your presentation that you had a device that you purchased and you had a lot of problems with it that you struggled to get them to take care of. Well, this gives you some leverage that, and we had a whole acceptance process that we went through. Delivery and installation time is of the essence. This is important because anytime you buy a big piece of iron and are having it installed, there's time that you're unable to take care of patients with that while they're deinstalling and reinstalling. And so you want to make sure that you've got language in there that ensures that that's going to be done in as timely a manner as possible so that you can start generating revenue again. Documentation. So documentation, both user documentation and service documentation, licenses and permits, that anything that's required to operate that thing, we will get. And then, as I said, installation and acceptance testing and how we deal with both failures and acceptance. And then a section on warranties, product warranties, and if we opt for, well, certainly during the warranty period, what is that uptime warranty? And if we opt for a service agreement, what would that uptime warranty be? And then assurance that they will comply with any laws, assurance that we get any software firmware and that it works, warranties against viruses, and then a glassware warranty.
One thing too that should be negotiated within this purchasing process is who does software updates, operating system updates. Is that you or is that the vendor? And in this world of cybersecurity, make sure that's clearly defined. Again, but this is all adds up to that right to repair and making sure your nose is under that tent so that you are getting these tools at your disposal and not waiting for a vendor to supply them.
So I was talking earlier, Chris, about relationships, and I recall an instance where we had a GE contract that we were canceling, and the head of radiology called me, the medical director of radiology called me and was losing his mind over the cancellation of this contract because the salesperson had told him that because we canceled that contract, he wasn't going to get any of his software upgrades or updates, and that would impact his ability to provide optimum patient care. So I just let him rant and rave for 15, 20 minutes or so. And then I said, well, doctor, I think it's important that I explain something to you, that the software that he's talking about is software that we get anyway under the terms of our master agreement. Okay, they have to provide that. But if what you need is a forklift upgrade that provides additional functionality of that device, that's not covered under the contract, and you would have to pay for that anyway. And I can show you the contract language that states that. And there was a dead silence for about a minute, and I said, "Doctor, you still there?" He goes, "Yep. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to make that salesperson's life a living hell."
Yep.
Last components of the purchasing section: term and termination, limitation of liability and damages, insurance and indemnity. And those second and the third one are the ones that take the most time legally to hammer out between your organization and the vendor. And then confidentiality and venue, which says that if we end up in court, which state is it going to be resolved in? Okay, so now the stuff that has a greater impact on us. So service agreement options. So if we opt to sign a service agreement, and again, that's a big if, because we'll, at the end of the warranty period, we'll decide whether we're going to do the service ourselves or whether we'll sign a service contract.
Third party.
Yeah, or third party. And if we do, here's the pricing. Here's the discounts on service contract. Minimum repair hours. Often in those service contracts, they'll say we're going to charge you a minimum, or even on time and materials, a minimum of 4 hours. And we never agreed to that. We said, okay, the minimum 2 hours we'll accept. But so like if it takes them an hour to repair it, they're still going to charge you 4 hours according to their language. Non-obsolescence, meaning that for the term of this agreement, you can't you're compelled to deliver service on that thing. I don't care if it goes end of life or not. Committed response time, plan maintenance parameters, and the pricing on time and materials coverage. And then this is important too, definition of regular overtime and premium rates. And I always want to call out to people that when they're looking at things from a budget perspective, they're only looking at the cost of that contract, but there isn't a contract in existence at 24/365, none. And so they're typically Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Well, if you've got a critical CT in your ER that goes down, you're not waiting. Okay, you're going to call in service. So you better figure out, a little bit of fluff to account for what you're going to get charged over and above the contract.
Yep.
Discount on repair parts, vendor biomedical training. Again, I said, you want to make sure that in this agreement that they are committing to train you with the same information and resources that they train their own guys with. Technologist training, licensed diagnostic software. So this is the software keys that you would need to service some of these devices. You want to make sure that those are included in here. I was talking to Rob Bundick yesterday about some of the stuff that he ran into. And he said, well, we ran into that where they said the only way that they can provide that is if there is a contract that exists. And so I thought back to my time, both Rob's and my time at Aurora, and we had a committed time and materials service agreement. So I went to these vendors and I said, if this thing breaks down and it's not under contract, I have the option to call anybody for service. What's it worth to you to have me call you every time? And from that, we were able to negotiate committed response times and things like the uptime warranties and software that we then tied to that contract. So we had a contract. We didn't pay an annual fee for it. We just used them when we needed to use them. So I'm certainly willing to offer up to anybody that's interested a copy of that redacted agreement, because I took all our name out of it and the vendor's name out of it. But what I went through today was the highlights of that, because it's actually pretty detailed. And but these are the things that will give you access to the things that you need, the parts, the service keys, whatever you need to effectively service that equipment. Because as Chris said at the outset, at the end of the day, it's doing what's best for our patients, right? And I could just tell you that when we took over service on previously full contract devices, what we found was scary. I mean, blankets of dust on all the card cages. It was nasty. And within 6 months, our uptime on those modalities jumped through the roof, because we were servicing them the way that they were intended to be serviced and followed the manufacturer's recommended service to the letter.
So I think this was a different right to repair seminar that you may have expected, because I've delivered several of them. I've been to others, and it always kind of devolves into a bitch and moan session about manufacturers. And so Al and I approached it from a perspective of, hey, can we give them a couple of nuggets to take home and try and speak with their administrators to try and improve their position within the organization, to help that organization save money and provide patients with a better experience while they're at their facility. And I think that's what our aim was today, versus trying to gripe about, Philips or Siemens or whomever. The lab, we don't talk about lab equipment. Lab equipment drives me bonkers, some of the crap that goes on in the laboratory. And of course, our friends at Intuitive Surgical. So.
We had reagent rental agreements that included service.
Yeah.
I approached them because I thought, we can do that. We can do that service. Pretty complicated equipment. Yeah, so it's TVs and MRIs and med cameras and everything else that we serve. But did to make my case is I did the calculation on what the actual service was costing within that reagent. It was outrageous.
Yeah. Yep. Any questions?
I just have a comment in regards to, we have vendors out there in which we've gone to vendors and we've asked, all right, hey, we want to go to your training course. And the vendors go, nope, not a chance, can't do it. We don't offer training at all. We only do it for our people. That's it. You have your product sitting right here. You want to do your training.
Yeah.
I can see it's a knob.
Yeah.
It's a $3 knob. I can see in Germany, they offer training. I can see the German tech manual online to certain forums. You can see it offered in Germany. The United States, they won't do it. But, you know, it's just situations like that where we have, you know, is there ways to get around? You know, I understand your contract and we worked with each other for many years. But I mean, you know, it's this constant
So-
pushback from OEMs. We want their training, but as soon as you say, hey, can we get OEM training? Oh, we don't offer it to you.
And I think it's becoming more and more.
And it's constant because we are an in-house program.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not even a third party.
I think the solution there is to educate your leadership and what that means. And they have to have, now, there are products out there that we don't have a whole lot of alternatives for. Now, you know, I'm arguing with my team at the office because Abiomed, right? Everybody use Abiomed? The Impella? Sure. Very expensive. And you better buy, you know, Scott Themo. I don't know if Scott Themo works for them anymore, but since J&J bought them, because I do have another guy that I talk to. But, you know, when you look up the results of using the Impella versus using an intra-aortic balloon pump, there's virtually no difference in the outcome for the patient. Correct. And that Impella, that setup, I forget how much we were paying, maybe $30,000 a setup to get that going. I mean, it's crazy money.
Then the contract would be, you know, back today. Scott, so I pointed out to Scott people, I pulled up, and just to bring his name up.
I hated that guy.
It's like, and mostly because what I like to remind him is how long their program was. He looked at that and I said, I need to take you through what I'm buying $10,000, right? And ultimately it was a coin battery replacement, a software flash, and about a 30-minute, like you're charged $10,000 to do this. And I pulled up like their investor center for Aviomed, and there was a line in their yearly reports for their income, an individual line for service contract revenue. That's how much of a percentage their service contract revenue was of their entire revenue.
But yeah,
And I pointed that out to him. I said, you know what, like, GE does it, right? I mean, like, this is how obnoxious you guys are. Anyway, it didn't do any good to.
it's 13,500 now.
Okay.
But you know, Scott, you know, I didn't have a service agreement at one of my locations, and we wanted to replace the battery. And at that point, I was paying $9,000 or $9,500 for a PM. And I said, no, you know, I just want to buy the battery. He says it's $9,500. I said, no, that's a full service kit. No, I know. You want to buy the battery? It's $9,500. This is Scott Themo. I wanted to wring his neck. And, you know, so I wound up, he said, hey, you know what? You want to sign up for a service agreement? I'll let you sign up for a service, and then we'll replace the battery. So, but that's the kind of unethical. I think it's unethical. But to your point, there are some, you know, if there's an alternative, like I'm trying to talk now it's a clinical thing, right? I gotta go sell my cardiology folks that, hey, why are we using the Abiomed when you look at the results, and you can look up all the papers that are written that the results don't bear out that it's a better therapy than good old fashioned intra-aortic balloon pumping. And an intra-aortic balloon is a whole lot less expensive. $1,500, $2,000 for a balloon, $2,000. So uh, so that's where I'm trying to talk my clinical folks into making a practice change based upon Abiomed.
So Brian, I want to say too, first of all, I agree with Chris that if you can find alternatives, and in some cases there are. I mean, over the years I have used RSTI for some things, and there are alternate sources for service training on other devices, but you're not gonna find that for everything. You're not going to, for the things that you've already bought the stuff and you don't have those master purchase and service agreements in place, you may be kind of stuck. But like we talked about, all right, this is how it is now. I'm going to have to deal with that and eat it for the time being. But moving forward, develop those relationships and I would document the cost of that. Here's what it's costing us to do business with this company versus if we chose an alternative. And going back to the session I did this morning, we had documented statistics on what the total cost of ownership was for one device versus another device of the same type.
Yep.
For that exact reason.
Yeah, I mean, my MSA contracts that I write up, I always put training and education in there. And Philips did a unique thing with me, and I tried to get GE to do it as well. But Philips put in $200,000 a year to train and educate staff, any of my staff across the country. So, we did sign up with that agreement, and it worked out well because it gave me access to their training, all of the parts that I needed, and it allowed me to assimilate into the imaging environment, which we throughout. It was an outsourced program to General Electric, fully outsourced to GE across the country, and we brought it all in-house. And that was part of that MSA was, hey, I needed training because now I had a bunch of folks across the country that I had a few imaging engineers, but I needed to develop that imaging program. And I went with the MSA route to, hey, you're going to train them. Canon was very amenable to that. Philips, believe it or not, Philips was very amenable to that. Yeah, even to the point where some of my smaller hospitals, I would always get pushback from the C-suite. Oh, we don't have any money for education. We don't have any money to pay for education. And I got Philips to actually use that same 200,000 not only for tuition but for travel as well. So it worked out pretty well.
So I'm just curious, Brian. I mean, we were successful doing this just back in my time at Aurora. Now you guys are huge, with the merger with Advocate and now Atrium. Are they actually leveraging the size of the organization to bring that power of the PO to bear? Maybe you don't even know, but
We're doing some.
okay.
There's some manufacturers which are just all refusing. I did not say that out loud. Hyperbaric chambers, I didn't say that out loud. But I know that back from your days.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Now,
just looked at them, I just can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
now somebody mentioned Draeger. They are moving. They do a lot of infant OB stuff in Telford, Pennsylvania. All that line is shutting down. They've given those folks notice that they're shutting down, and they're moving all that to Germany. So from a manufacturing perspective, nothing will be going on here any longer. It'll all be done in Germany. So
You fight the battles you can, Brian, and
We all
Yep.
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 Training.
Yep.
Advance.
So a little different right to repair seminar today. We thought maybe we could have you go home with a couple of nuggets to try out and work with your C-suite. But I think the party starts in 15 minutes, the happy hour. I appreciate you attending this afternoon session. And hey, anybody, feel free if you ever want to talk or want to ask me questions or anything, feel free to get in touch with me.
Okay.
How they weren't doing that
It's right here, line 22.
I know. Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. I just put your headshot and put your face when I walked through I thought there was a nice. Have a good one.
So this may not be down, hold on. I don't care. I think
That's all I heard you 3 o'clock in the morning outside.
See how like I'm this focused working? This is what the client needs to be. Got a little jigsaw puzzle missing somewhere, bud. Incel. Who's that over Who's that weird Tom Ellis? Oh, the lady? Yeah, Betsy. Yeah, she's the Puerto Rican one more. Like, yo, she'll give me this and I'm like, I don't know, I support on you. I bet they are.
Right, so
I'm trying to get them big.
You know what?
Oh, yeah. He gonna smile. Just go with the travel. That's how much you better. Yeah, better.
I just had an hour long. All right.
We want to get to the hard guys. We want to get to the hard guys. Get all your questions.
Mike, your glasses.
Thank you. And tell me, I like to write.
Yeah, I see the yellow thing from them.
Where you visiting from?
Oh
I'm from Chicago, and I always think it's called Waukesha.
my God, yeah.
I first came here, my friends said, yeah. He's like, oh, I found my dad in Tulsa. I was like, you're in Oklahoma? He's like, no, Wawa, Tulsa. I was like, oh, Tulsa, not Tulsa.
The tag over here.
Now you got Lucky's out there in Wauwatosa, I heard. Yeah, everybody's excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
I think I went to Canada, like Waukesha, and then we saw like the house on the rock.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really pretty over there.
Yeah.
Crashy.
So you're from here?
No, born and raised Chicago.
So, one day in your presentation. Yeah.
And now it's got a little bit bigger.
I always devolve into right to repair. I said to Alex, we talked about the last time I saw you.
Good.
Love your. I was sitting there, it was one of my first times, and I'm like.
No bags for what? For these? That's fine. Here. You want a bag? There you go. I don't like the bag because then it makes like more like room to fold over. So when you're trying to close the box, it's super tight. And I'm like, it's a, yeah, it definitely does. I'm like, no. It's like you're actually putting more wear and tear. The box is just as important as the gear. It's like the box can't close and do the shit right. That's the gear job. Fill it.
So I'm used to big dog.
Thanks, guys.
No worries. Glad everything went smooth.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're stealing all your corporate secrets.
You can, they're not really secret, since we're gonna record them and tell the world. Come on.
Free information. Well, I hope you guys enjoy your event and the view. It's a very beautiful